Welcome to another episode of the Franchise Development Playbook. I've got a special guest, a friend of mine and fellow New York City native or resident, at least, Mark Kane, CEO of Franchise. What's going on, Mark?
Hey, Dan. How's it going? Thanks for having me on. Excited
Yeah.
to be on the pod finally.
Yeah, long time no see since we just took an Uber ride back together from the airport last night.
Well, I'm a big fan too. I'm a long-time listener, first time caller kind of situation. So I'm excited.
That's always good. You don't have any weird shrine at your house, right? Just kidding.
Not yet. I mean, it's probably been a year since we've known each other.
Has it already been a year?
I feel like we met at IFA. Yeah. So maybe year 5, I put the shrine in my closet. But yeah, we're trending in that direction for sure.
Well, I had the shrine myself, day one, because I was like, this is the only other person. We were at the IFA when we met. I was doing a round table, and Mark said that he also lived in New York City, which literally me, Mark, and few other people live here in franchising.
Yeah. That's funny. I remember, I think you saw my business card or something, and you were like, does it say New York City on it? Like 10014? Are you serious?
Yeah.
And we just had one of those moments.
Yeah. Well, and now getting into this industry, what I've learned about franchising is it's really expanding as far as the professional backgrounds that are coming into it. Obviously you see all the private equity professionals making investments into franchising, but now you're seeing people with backgrounds like yours, which you can get into, an incredible background, coming into the space. Mm-hmm. Just to start out, what attracted you to franchising, and how did you end up, building a software company in the space?
Yeah, sure. It's a good question. So I actually have a family business growing up that was a franchisor. Yeah. I'm originally from Dallas, Texas. We actually have a big Cowboys game tomorrow, which I'm excited about. Are you a Giants fan?
I'm a Giants fan.
Okay. Yeah, you have a game tonight, I guess.
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, so originally from Dallas, Texas, and my family business growing up was a franchisor. My dad has one of those great franchising stories where, and you might relate to this, Dan, as a serial entrepreneur. He had failed multiple times in business. He had tried real estate. He had tried a couple other things. And in his late 30s, early 40s, gave up, and he decided to go to law school. He had 2 kids. He's like, I'm done with this entrepreneurial journey. It's too much. But he couldn't stop. He was always tinkering. And in order to pay his bills through law school, he set up a kiosk in a flea market in Dallas, was selling used CDs. It was a buy-sell trade concept, and the concept took off in the flea market. So he was working on the weekends, and he had enough. He was making enough money each weekend to cover his monthly expenses
through that flea market CD sales business.
Exactly.
So just to clarify, multiple businesses in his 20s and 30s, and you said in his late 30s.
I think he was 38 when he enrolled. He took the LSAT, enrolled in SMU Law School down in Dallas, and he just had to put food on the table. He's like, I'm a smart guy, I'm just going to become a lawyer. But he found success with this concept and realized that he had real potential here, and so he franchised the concept eventually, and he went from that kiosk in that flea market over a couple of years to 300 locations worldwide through a concept called CD Warehouse. And so he kind of lived the franchisor journey in the early 2000s.
What happened to law school? Did he leave or did he finish?
So it's so funny. He's really proud of his bar card. He did graduate. He took and passed the bar, but he never ended up practicing law. But as you know, as a franchisor, it did come in handy. When it comes to the FDD, he actually had a number of legal issues with franchisees, which is super common. And so I think his legal background did help him as a franchisor, but he never officially practiced.
So how did he, just to understand this story, he was in law school with a family while also doing a CD franchisor.
Yep. Yeah, he was extremely busy. It takes a village, right? My mom was at the kiosk helping out. Growing up, I was helping out with the business a lot too. So I was always that kid over the summer that instead of running around on bikes with my friends, I was in the stores. I was cleaning bathrooms. I was a cashier.
Really?
So it was really formative for me growing up, kind of living in this entrepreneurial environment. And so I always knew that one day I did want to start my own business and be a founder and an entrepreneur.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're in high school, maybe deep down there's this desire to be an entrepreneur, but walk me through like where'd you go to school? What was your path? Where'd you get into your career?
Yeah, so I went to UPenn, University of Pennsylvania. Again, I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I knew I needed that core business toolkit.
Yeah.
So I did a couple of internships through college, but ultimately after graduation, I decided to go into management consulting. I thought this would, because the way management consulting works is you work with a number of Fortune 500 clients and private equity firms, and you're solving their hardest business problems.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought this was a great way to gain a lot of experience in a lot of different industries, solving these, various problems from cost cutting to long-term strategy. So I actually loved that. I worked at Bain for 8 years after college, and actually earned my MBA also at the University of Pennsylvania during that time.
I was going to say, so that work ethic must just be ingrained, because while doing, probably grueling hours at Bain, you're also earned your MBA.
Yeah. Well, they kind of give you 2 years off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So Bain sponsored the MBA. They said, take 2 years, go back to Wharton, build a network, kind of refine your finance, accounting, marketing toolkit, and come back. And that's kind of the drill. It's a great deal.
Yeah, it really is.
Hard to say no to that.
Right. So you go, and then what? You went back for a period of time, and
Yep. So, I mean, my path specifically was 3 years at Bain out of college, 2 years at business school, and then another 3 years after business school at Bain. And at that point, I was really starting to feel the itch, to jump in and do my own thing. And so, I thought I kind of had some of these introspective conversations with myself about what makes me unique, what kind of business do I want to start, what could I start? And of course, I'm very close with my dad, talking to him about his journey and honestly my upbringing too, kind of what makes me unique. And I realized that I grew up idolizing franchising.
Interesting.
Right? It's a super powerful concept, and I'm sure you agree with this, Dan. Like, it allowed my dad to take his business from a kiosk to 300 locations.
Sure.
And then each of those 300 locations minted a new entrepreneur as well, which is super exciting. It's each new location is someone quitting their corporate job and becoming a founder, which is great. So I kind of grew up idolizing franchising, but the more I talked to my dad, the more I realized how hard it is to be a franchisor. And maybe you're running.
You mean now, like later on, like recently over the years?
Of course.
The more you spoke to him as you've gotten older.
Yeah, because I feel like I got the rosy picture growing up, but as an adult and as someone in the business world, talking to my dad about, how hard it was to be a franchisor. And in fact, if you talk to him, he wouldn't franchise again. He had multiple concepts after that he decided not to franchise because he was a little bit scarred by his experience with some franchisees and with growing the business. So light bulb went off in my head. This is a really powerful concept that drives a large swath of the American small business economy, but it's hard. It's really difficult. It's a really painful process to build a franchise. So that's really the impetus for the company that I started, which is, our mission is to empower entrepreneurs on both sides of the franchise agreement. So making the franchisors' lives easier and making the franchisees' lives easier through software.
Okay, so you knew you wanted to go into franchising and helping franchisees and franchisors through a solution.
Yep.
I identified technology was an area that you wanted to go into in that vertical.
Absolutely.
In the franchising space. So, this podcast dedicated toward, really the only podcast dedicated toward just specifically franchise development and helping people that help others find franchises become successful, right? Helping people that are in the role, which I think is a really important responsibility. If you're in franchise development, whether you're a franchise director in a brand or you're a consultant, coach, broker, whatever the term you use, you have a heavy responsibility on your shoulders to usher someone from potential franchise owner to now business owner. And they're putting a lot of faith in your ability to communicate the business models to them and then make an informed decision. So your solution helps many things on the franchisor side, but when it comes to helping franchisors and find franchisees, can you talk to what your CRM does, or just CRM in general?
Yeah, sure. And you said it well. So Franchisely, again, our mission is to empower entrepreneurs on both sides of the franchise agreement. And we do that by helping franchisors. Let's stick with the franchisor side. We help them grow their franchise through franchise development, CRM. We help them launch franchisees through onboarding tools and project management software. And then we actually help them run their franchise too with operations software as well. Mm-hmm. This podcast is specific to franchise development, so I can kind of talk a little bit about our franchise CRM. What that does is it helps the franchisor recruit franchisees, as you mentioned. And it has all the bells and whistles that a typical CRM is going to have, like, automated outreach, clear lead management in a visual way, so you can take the lead through your specific pipeline and franchise sales process. But I think where we differentiate a little bit is really two things. The first thing is a really simple and easy to use interface. The research we did, there are a number of solutions out there that take months to set up. It's a 90-day onboarding. It's complicated settings. You got to get it just right or it doesn't quite work. And we have the franchisor in mind always. We're talking to franchisors all day. And what we found was that franchisors are busy with a lot of other things.
Right.
If they're an emerging brand, for example, they're still running their business in a lot of cases, dealing with franchisees. So we wanted to minimize the headache associated with getting set up in a CRM system. So we've made it very simple and very easy to use, to the point where you can get up and running in just a couple of days. The other real differentiator that we have is the use of AI tools. So we're a tech-first company, and we were founded in late 2021. So we have the advantage of A, starting from scratch, right, but B, being able to implement the latest and most modern software into the franchise technology space.
Sure.
So, the way the AI works, for example, is when you're dealing with franchise leads, what we found is a lot of franchisors like to hire what's called a lead qualifier. And this is a human being, kind of an entry-level position. Yeah. And their full-time job is to text message a lead, call a lead, email a lead, just to get them on the phone with the salesperson, with the franchise developer. Yeah. And so we're introducing AI. We've named her Samantha, that does this job.
How did you choose that name?
So it's my co-founder Islam's wife's name.
Did she consent to being an AI?
I don't know. I mean, I haven't had her sign anything, so we'll see. We probably should send her some sort of legalese on that.
No, I guess you didn't use her last name, so.
Yeah, no. And the image, the avatar that we're using is not her.
Yeah, okay, you're fine.
So yeah, it's a red. She's a Samantha. Our Samantha, the AI, is a redhead, and she's blonde, so we're okay.
Okay, all right.
But yeah, anyway, so Samantha, what she does is reaches out to the lead automatically via text message and can actually have a conversation with the lead. Yeah. So a great example is, hey, I'm interested in joining your franchise. The lead submits an inquiry into our CRM, or really any CRM. Yeah. Samantha reaches out and says, thanks for your interest. Would you like to schedule some time with Dan? He's the franchise developer in this case. The lead can say yes. The lead can ask a couple of questions if they have them, and Samantha will understand the questions, be able to respond. But most importantly, Samantha can actually schedule the meeting on your behalf. So instead of having a full-time lead qualifier, or, if you don't have a lead qualifier, this is valuable time as on the franchisor side. We're doing it for you automatically in the background with our technology. And it's all via text message too. So the lead actually sees the correspondence. A lot of emails these days, as you know, are going to spam.
Yeah.
They're not getting checked. So text messages have a 98% open rate. And you know that better than anyone, Dan.
Yeah. I mean, I've had definitely in previous businesses the experience in that space, but it's interesting. I remember thinking back to my really early into my career, I was involved in some lead generation for a funding company, and they had this call center with 20 people making calls all day to secure financing for businesses. And one day the CEO came in very excited with their product. At this time, by the way, this is early. This is 10 years ago. It was called Jennifer, and I mean the product was called I think Conversico, but the product Jennifer was the early AI type of chatbot that was sending mass emails and communicating with people through email to get them on the phone. And I'll never forget, it was, negative for the teammates there, but all of a sudden he went from having 20 dialers to he really leaned into this product and invested into it. It was probably $30,000 up front at that time that you had to pay.
Wow.
Which sounds like a lot, but when you think about 20 dialers times, their payroll times a month, he took the risk, he invested into that service. And I remember it was a little bit sad again for those teammates, but he went from 20 callers to 3 because all of a sudden those dialers were just talking to qualified candidates.
Right.
And this was 10 years ago. So he ended up selling that company for a lot of money because, he was so early in, but I understand the power of that. And so your system, well, let's talk about before, with what you're doing. If I was a franchisor and I was thinking about changing CRMs, if I already had a CRM, it's a daunting, or at least in my mind, it would be a daunting task. No matter how great your AI is, Samantha, I love her, but I'm afraid of moving all my data over. What is that process like? Do you make that pretty seamless, or what is that like?
Well, and we have a couple of options, right? Samantha does work with other CRMs. So if as a franchisor, you have this problem and maybe you have a lead qualifier, you're considering hiring one, Samantha still works and you can utilize it alongside your existing CRM, which is great. And we have a couple of clients that have done that and have seen their booking rates go from, for example, 20%, which is really low, getting that initial intro call, to closer to 45%. So, it's a powerful solution regardless of your CRM.
So this is a mistake I always make, thinking that you have your main CRM, but Franchisely as a company is a software company, so you're developing all kinds of tools that are standalone too, that can be used if they're not moving to a different CRM, but they want to utilize Samantha. That tool is available with through an API or some type of connection.
That's right. And then we do have the full solution as well. So if you don't have a CRM, or you are looking to make a switch, we make that easy, right? And we have resources that do, to your point, a lot of the onboarding associated with migrating data from one to the other. We're actually and we're leaning in pretty heavily into AI. We're at this conference this past week, at the Titus Center, and Dan Monahan at the end of his keynote was talking about GPT, which is kind of this new AI technology, which is cool. Our engine for AI is based on GPT, which allows us to do a lot of really interesting things. One of them, for example, is specific to franchising. It's taking the franchise agreements. Let's say you have 40 franchise agreements. You can use AI to actually scrape the franchise agreements for all the relevant data, and instead of typing it into your system of record, you can just upload the franchise agreement, and boom, all the information that you need is in kind of this system of record. So we're toying with ways to make it easier to do this kind of data upload that's really painful and manual using AI.
I think it's really just a mental block anyway. It's not that hard of a shift once you make the commitment to do it. I've switched CRMs before, and it's really not that hard. But with the chat,
you switch from.
Oh man, I'm like a CRM geek. I've used I've used Zoho. I've used HubSpot. I've used Client Tether. We're currently in the use of. I've used what's another one?
It sounds like you have some commitment issues. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, yeah. I know that's a competitor, but I like all CRMs. I'm Switzerland in CRM world.
Yeah. No, and you're definitely like one of the more sophisticated CRM users that I've spoken to. Like you really, I think, can appreciate all the data that goes into it and comes out of it, which, I always love chopping it up with you for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have CRM commitment issues. That's funny, but they all have different. Everything has. Well, it changes, right? Everyone technology is changing, and I think that for you to think that you're going to stay, like I'm actually considering, believe it or not, this is crazy, but I've been a diehard Apple, Google, person. The economy of the two.
Oh no, are you going to become a green text bubbler?
I'm not. I will not become a green text bubble. I refuse.
Green bubbler, no.
I refuse. But I am now a Microsoft user. Okay. Instead of the Google Suite, G Suite. I'm using Microsoft because our COO really felt it was the right choice. And my thing was like, look, if you're going to be in the day to day of running our company, mostly, let's use what you feel is
totally
most suitable. And there's a bunch of reasons why we're using it, but point of what I'm saying is that if Samsung did make changes that were worth it, I would switch, right? Because things change every year, and you got to be mindful that what was the best solution even 6 months ago can change from, especially with Chat GPT. That's an incredible, scary thing that's happening right now.
Yeah, it's wild, but we're a year old, just over a year old as a company. So we are going up against incumbents that have been around for 20 years, basically. So our solution really just needs to be 10 times better. And in order to do that, we need to be implementing the latest technology, whatever it may be. So, and I agree with your COO. I'm kind of a Microsoft guy.
You are.
But it's funny, my whole team is software engineers at this point. It's me, my co-founder, who's a technical guy, CTO, and 5 software engineers. They all use Mac.
But you got the Microsoft probably from your experience with from working with Bain.
Yeah. I just lived in PowerPoint and Excel. So it's just, a decade of work in the same system. It is.
I will say I love it. It's better.
Yeah.
I think, no offense, Google users, I am now a diehard Microsoft fan when it comes to Excel and reports and everything in PowerPoint is better. So let's talk about, like, you've got all these technology solutions that you're building within your products and your suite of products. What would you say? And again, the point of this podcast, we get right into
we're Fran Dev on this podcast, right?
Yeah, but I was also saying, like, I like to get really into it, into the nitty gritty, so people can take away something like actionable.
Yeah.
And so, well, first of all, just before I forget, plug for the Titus Center Selling Franchises Bootcamp. Mark and I, at the time of recording this, we were just there in Palm Beach yesterday and today. I wish I was still there. It was so nice. Not only were we in the warmth of summer of Florida, but we also were on a college campus, and I really miss being on a college campus.
Oh man, if I had, I was just kind of reliving my college days. And it's like, man, if the weather were this good in college, I would have done 5 years, maybe 6.
I wouldn't. Yeah,
failed a couple classes on purpose just to stay.
You don't know how good you have it when you're there. I saw kids just laying out on the grass, reading books. I'm like, man.
Well, I was. Again, maybe this is a shameless plug, but I was really impressed by the students that attended the boot camp.
Oh yeah.
They were so eager to learn. They're asking great questions. They were, I think, super pumped about franchising, which I didn't, I guess I had a family business, but I'm just like pretty impressed by that group.
Honestly, I was invigorated by like when you're 20 years old or 21 years old and you're about to start your career, you think we're motivated, like their drive and their optimism for the future, it's contagious.
Totally.
I wish I had franchising as a program when I was their age. It's really cool that the Titus Center's doing that. Anyway, enough plugging. Check it out, Selling Franchise Bootcamp. But back to the scheduled programming. Let's go through, like, what would you say your major USP to the systems you've built are right now? Like, what's the major reason someone
USP?
Unique selling proposition.
Unique
so like
selling proposition.
what's like super different about Franchisely than other systems?
Yeah, again, I would go back to those 2 points, right? It's a simple, easy to use user experience. Like we're trying to be the anti-clunky. So it's really intuitive, visual. You're moving leads around in the system. It feels almost like a game.
Okay.
And it's kind of purpose built for, we set out initially to work mostly with emerging brands. So again, it's someone who's busy doing other stuff that doesn't have time to work with a super clunky, hard to use system. So I think that's kind of our USP. I love the term USP. I'm going to use that now. That's USP number 1. And then USP number 2 really is more of a data-driven kind of a point, which is we use AI and the modern technology that's out there today to really inflect your conversion rate. And we focus specifically on booking rate. So taking, the number of leads that you're able to actually have a meeting with from a lower percentage to a higher percentage. And that ultimately affects your conversion rate, which affects your ability to sign franchisees, which ends up it being royalty revenue. So when we talk about the value proposition of a tool like that, you got to think about it over the next 10 to 15 years. If you're signing double the number of franchisees, you're getting double the number of royalties over that time frame, which could be millions of dollars.
So let's say someone is a system that is using, let's use an example like Fran Connect, right? Great system, obviously a titan in the industry. But if someone is looking to make a switch for whatever reasons, and they're evaluating CRM systems, what would you say the major reason to switch? I understand the AI components, but how about specifically from switching from that system to yours? What are you seeing usually is the reason?
Yeah. So, I would go back to those 2 points again, which is, let's say you hired a new franchise developer. It takes them a long time to get set up and understand kind of an interface that's a bit clunkier. We're simple and easy to use. So you can just get up to speed in a number of days, and it feels like a modern CRM experience.
The user interface experience is clean. It's easy. Anyone can understand it.
It's visual. It's, it looks closer to like a HubSpot, for example. And then the other piece is really that data-driven piece. We can inflect the conversion rate metric specifically using AI. And when it comes down to it, that's really all that matters when it comes to franchise development, right? You want to get the right people in, but ultimately you're in franchising to grow and to sell more franchises. So, we're inflecting the conversion rate, but we're also saving franchisors money and time with AI. So instead of having lead qualifiers, for example, it's AI. So it's a lower cost.
Right. So let's talk about some of these solutions in FranDev, kind of away from CRM, your CRM. Let's get into CRM in general and some things that I've seen that I'm curious about your thoughts, because you're living and breathing in this type of product. So my experience as we build out our franchise development system now for our franchisor, I've taken a very deep approach on making sure we build it properly in the beginning. And so what I've said to my team is, you never want to focus on one piece of traffic. Now, I don't want one candidate to come through this funnel or this journey until it's perfect. And if we need to, invest time, energy, money into making it perfect before we ever let one candidate go through our journey, that's better. I'd rather us do that and it take us a few extra months than rush to having people come through a negative or not a perfect, buyer journey.
Yeah.
And so what are your thoughts on, with the AI, what are your thoughts on when leads are coming in, lead scoring?
Yep.
Like my perfect situation is a lead comes in, it's emailed and texted right away. That's a given at this point. That's like your beginner. They're called within seconds, not minutes, within seconds. And that can be through a scheduler, like you mentioned, lead qualifier, and that they're booked onto a point, onto a calendar.
Yep.
And then when they're booked onto the calendar, I think it's important that a next piece of communication based on that is sent to them. Mm-hmm. And then once you begin communicating with them through the journey, the buyer journey, it's like a logic tree, right? So if they do this, picture a tree. Like if they do this, they go here. If they do this, they go there. And it's all these variant of ways. But lead scoring, in my opinion, has always been challenging because there's a weight to certain actions. Mm-hmm. In other words, just because someone clicks a link, there's more of a weight to it if they click at it on it at a certain time, or if they look at it, your website for a certain time. And I've found that lead scoring cannot always be perfect. You can't trust it 100%. So can you talk about your lead scoring and maybe how AI is helping make that more accurate?
Yeah, and lead scoring is interesting too, because a lead could be clicking on your website or opening your email multiple times, but that could be what's called an MQL, not an SQL. So that might not be a qualified lead, right?
Sure.
So
do you want to just define that for anyone that doesn't know?
A marketing qualified lead, MQL, versus a sales qualified lead. So the first one, the former, they're interested in your brand, something that you've sent them caught their interest, and they're clicking on your content. And SQL means that they have, I liked how Dan Monahan put it this week, they have Tim, they have the time, the interest, and the money to actually, become a franchisee. And so with Samantha and our AI, we're focused more on, moving the lead from MQL to SQL via text message. So it's fully customizable. Samantha can ask any question that you want. But one of them that we hear commonly is about the M in the Tim. How much money do you have? Asking it in a polite way, but are you aware that this is a $100,000 investment? Yes or no? And then our AI can actually filter them.
Really,
as you said, the logic tree into a don't prioritize this lead versus this is a warm lead, follow up immediately.
Can Samantha change her tonality based on first?
Yeah. So we have three tones that you can choose from as a franchisor. So there's the energetic tone that you might want for example, an ice cream brand, but there's also the more polite, serious tone that you could want for a service, probably a home service business. I don't know. What tone would you want for a home service business in Samantha?
I think the tone is polite with urgency and a level of, I would like to inflect the tone that I have, that I feel I have, which is hey, I'm here to help you. And I'm also here to one of the things I tell people is building rapport with a client is not about we love the same baseball team or that's cool. But the reality is rapport is when that I can help you get where you want to be. That to me is what people want when they're looking to buy a franchise. They have enough friends. They want a friend,
right?
But they want to get to the goal. Mm-hmm. So I'd want a tone of urgency that's polite. But I have to ask, have you seen the movie Ex Machina?
Yeah, great movie. Love that.
Is the AI in that name Samantha?
It's been a while, and I watched it on a plane. Yeah. So I feel like I kind of black out and don't remember movies that I watch on a plane, but it might be. I should look into that.
It's a good movie. She ends up crazy ending. Ending. Yeah. Hopefully that doesn't happen with.
I hope not. Yeah. I hope that doesn't happen. But it's a cool. I think we're just kind of on the tip of the iceberg here. I think there's a lot of cool applications that AI can, how you can apply AI to franchising. So we've applied it here specifically in FranDev, and as I mentioned, specifically to be moving leads from MQL to SQL. But that's all in the pre-qualification process. What you were talking about was more of the discovery process. And right, so taking the buyer through the journey after that first, they pass the test. They're a sales qualified lead. And I think that's going to look different for each franchisor. But the important thing is to have a process, and it's not going to be perfect on day one. But I think the other important thing is to track how it's going after day one. A lot of franchisors that I talk to have a process, could be 4 steps, could be 7 steps, could be more. But they're not really tracking closely where it's starting to break down. So they can't adjust, right? It's not going to be perfect on day one. So you have to, after a month, after 2 months, look at the data, see where your candidates are dropping out of the process, and say, hey, between step 3 and step 4, something is off. Our developer isn't doing things right, or maybe we're sending the wrong materials or something. But I was talking to, have you met Art Coley with CGI?
What is CGI?
So they're a consulting company. They help with franchise recruitment.
Oh yes, he's done a ton of things in franchising.
He's a franchise legend.
But
they have a really clear process. It's an 8-step process.
Yeah,
and they're fervent believers in just tracking the data between steps. Hey, how many candidates dropped off from step 2 to step 3? That specific data, I feel, is not tracked nearly enough.
So let's get it. This brings us to a topic I'm very excited about, because it's an area that I'm very passionate about, which is like the KPI tracking and the reporting. So in our system that we're building, it's interesting what we're doing. I was telling you this last night. We're creating a culture of franchisees that are competitive with each other the same way if you got on a Peloton bike and you're competing with someone you don't even know. You just want to beat them, right? You want to be number 1 or 10 or whatever on the list, whatever your goal is. We want our franchisees to be able to compete from every metric, from gross sales to average job size to closing rate to profitability per job, et cetera. So we're creating that now through the technology stack that we're putting together. But when it comes to reporting, I personally have found there's no CRM that reports the way I want to. And I'm not talking about your CRM, but like take HubSpot. HubSpot is essentially a great product because it's a suite of different little products that are put together. And they did an incredible job putting them all together. So they're great at putting them all together, but each product, in my opinion, is mediocre. Like for each each department is mediocre, but it's great together. So when it comes to reporting, like I personally pull my reporting from CRM into a data warehouse, data warehouse is where all the data goes. CRM, think of all the data goes from the CRM into a data warehouse and then into like what's called a data visualization tool like Tableau or Power BI or Clipfolio to give you visual reports. But when you talk about these KPIs, that I really like what Carrie Gilly says, which is a Franchise Fastlane. She calls them TIFs, the important few.
Oh, nice. I like that.
Yeah, there's only so many metrics that really matter. And I was thinking about that because
people forget the K in KPI. Key.
Yes.
Right? You got to look at the key performance indicators.
Performance indicators. And so I was thinking about this because in my previous company, we had a lot of high ticket revenue. In other words, like $40,000 hits that would come in through commissions, and at 40 using the average commission of a consultant. So what I learned was people would say to me, how do you know with that much overhead, how do you know that like you're going to make any commissions? And I actually, to a pretty predictable point, I felt like I knew exactly how much money we would make 4 months out. Because if your sales cycle in franchising on average is 4 months, let's say, or a lot of people say 90 days, but let's say, 120 days. Well, you go back to your KPIs of 120 days prior. How many calls did you have? Candidates, qualified candidates, hard referral, whatever your KPIs, you can kind of pretty accurately predict where you're going to be.
Absolutely.
But what I think's really fascinating is that this can get even more accurate. So I'm going to give you a wish request. A very good, rare chance to ask the CEO of a company something like this. I would love, and tell me maybe it's already possible, but if there was a way to be able to record calls, obviously you got to let your candidates know that the call's recorded for legal reasons, follow that. But record calls, transcribe the calls through the technology, essentially monitor how much time the sales rep spoke versus the candidate. In other words, like percentage. Like on this podcast, Dan spoke 50%, Mark spoke 50%, and it can track that, which I've seen is done with other CRMs. Yep. But then be able to say, hey, looking back on a year of historical data, Jenny, our salesperson, closed at this percentage and John at this percentage. And on an aggregate, we learned that Jenny actually spoke only 30% of the time, whereas the new sales rep who maybe was talking too much, that you can't seem to get to understand that you should talk less, you can see through leading indicators, or excuse me, lagging indicators at this point, KPIs, you can see kind of why she's closing more than him. Is that something possible?
Yeah, so yes, I think it is possible, but I have a question for you. Do you think that's true? Do you think people who are selling things tend to talk too much and not listen enough?
Well, let's clarify. I think the top people,
Yeah.
the people that are awarding more franchises than anyone, understand this principle of, 2 ears, one mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And my first episode of the Franchise Development Playbook was about, you're actually more of a therapist than you are a sales. Like, your job is to listen to them and coach them through the discovery process. So to answer your question, yes, I firmly believe the best salespeople or sales professionals talk less, listen more, and are consultative.
Yeah, and just quick aside, that's why I love technology and technology product building and technology sales, because it is kind of like being a therapist, but I actually liken it more to being a psychiatrist, because you can prescribe medication. So it's like, hey, what are your problems?
Yeah.
Tell me all of your pain points, and at the end of the conversation, I have the pill for you. This is the technology that can solve that problem or that pain point. So, I was a management consultant. I'm kind of learning the tech sales toolkit, but that's something that I've really enjoyed so far, is just prescribing this technology medication, if you will. But to answer your question, absolutely possible. And there are tools. One thing coming into the franchising world more recently from non-franchising, there are a ton of great sales enablement tools out there that I don't think have caught fire in the franchising space yet. Like Gong comes to mind. Have you heard of Gong?
No, what's that?
They'll record sales calls and actually send you next steps based on recorded transcriptions.
Using AI?
Yeah, you said in this call that you were going to follow up.
It's down right now.
And a tool like that can absolutely measure that kind of data. But what it doesn't do, for example, is tie to your conversion metrics, for example, like with your CRM necessarily. That's what you're talking about.
I don't mean to be rude, by the way, Mark. I have to write it down or I'll forget.
No. And
Gong.
I don't use Gong. I'm not trying to plug it, but I think someone was telling me about that. There are a ton of cool sales tools out there.
And you can plug them into one like tech stack that you're using.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, that's definitely possible, and we're headed toward that. What we want to avoid doing, however, is overcomplicating it. Like, franchising is a really complex problem space. You've got franchise development, you've got, onboarding new franchisees, you got franchisee operations. It's a lot. And you could go so deep on each one of them, to the point where, you're maybe not investing as much in franchise operations, which is also important. So we've got to draw the line at some point, and we could include all of these crazy futuristic tools in each kind of section of franchising, but we're eventually moving toward the all-in-one solution that does everything.
I mean, it goes back to that. Can't say it without giving the credit to Carrie Gilly, the important few, the TIF, which I think is brilliant, because you get caught up in too many unimportant KPIs. But what would you say, in your experience, Mark?
Yeah.
What would you say most of your clients, when it comes to Fran Dev, what are their important few? What are their KPIs?
Yeah, and the ones that I think are most functional and kind of do this the best, to your point, track even fewer KPIs. Like, they keep it really simple. How many leads are we getting from which sources? At what rate are those leads from those sources converting? So, number of, at a very high level, number of leads, conversion rate, and they look at that typically in two ways: by source and by developer. So, how is my team doing, and how are my lead sources doing? And then I think the holy grail is, as we were talking about, the drop-off rate. So measuring the quality of your process, what's my booking rate from step 0 to step 1, right? So moving from this person submitted an inquiry to that first meeting, and then, how are they faring across each step? So, very high level, those three metrics, I think, can take you pretty far.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, you look at like what I would consider like show ratio. So lead comes in, they're qualified, they're scheduled. What's the percentage that show up to the call, the first call? And then you could say per source, per rep, even the front end person. Maybe your front end person, that lead qualifier is doing something wrong.
Samantha never does anything wrong.
Oh, Samantha's always it's Samantha, right? But if you're using like, let's say it's you have a lead qualifier, they're calling. You have two lead qualifiers, right? And all of a sudden, because you're looking at the data, you notice that Johnny has a 30% show ratio, which is atrocious, but Tim has a 90% show ratio. Why? Well, they're getting the same leads from the same sources. So what's the problem? And then you go back and you listen and you realize that, one of them is doing something wrong and you can pinpoint quickly.
Yeah.
I think that's the most important thing is KPIs are about finding. So you've got leading indicators and lagging indicators. Lagging is your P&L. Yeah. Oh, wow. We didn't make any money this year. Well, you didn't look at the leading indicators, right? Ahead of the time. So like show ratio on each appointment, or now you've got like that first call and then the second call, the show ratio is dropping. Why? Or if they get to the FDD in the franchise discovery process and they start to fall off, well, maybe your FDD is scaring them or you're not preparing them enough for the only way you're going to find those things is through data.
Validation is pretty common, right? Like, hey, the developer thinks they're not following up enough in the validation phase. That's something that I've seen kind of often.
You see that, so like a graveyard, like I think of it, a graveyard meaning like if someone like where the deals are dying, the graveyard, right? So a graveyard would be between step whatever and validation to the next step. That's an area you see a lot of times that falls off the cliff.
I think it's almost low hanging fruit for the developer to check in more often than not. Hey, how's validation going? Have you had these couple of calls? It just feels like a pretty low effort, high reward activity to just follow up and be sure that the candidate is doing those validation calls.
So in other words, you look back and you say, Rep A did do that in the CRM, and Rep 2 did not check in.
Correct.
And there's a correlation between closed deals and that action step.
Absolutely, yeah. But each brand's going to be different and have kind of different strengths and weaknesses. But yeah, absolutely. I think could help.
Like even like it's like virtual discovery day, regular discovery day. What closed more? That's an easy one. But
they brought that up at the conference this week, right?
Yeah.
I think show of hands, who's doing virtual versus in person?
Yeah,
a lot more in person than I expected, actually.
Yeah. I think my personal opinion, I think discovery day in person, you're never gonna like. I just met some of my team for the first time. Some of them I've been talking to for months. Like we're more close now because we met in person. So I just don't agree that until we're all in like the metaverse and everyone looks the same and looks like our human versions. I don't think you'll ever replace that. I think virtual makes sense when someone cannot go or they're like unwilling to go. Fine, host virtual. But
then is that a red flag too? If they're if they're unwilling to go.
I mean, unless they had some like very specific reason or they couldn't make the discovery day, but they're really serious. The next one's a month later. It's like, let's give them a virtual because we really want to, to have it. But yeah.
Have you seen Seinfeld, the bubble boy?
I have.
That's
just rewatched the whole season.
Oh, nice. That's what I'm picturing. Someone who would not go to an in-person discovery. Like, I'm afraid of any germ.
Yeah.
I live in a bubble.
He's like fantastic on the phone. You don't realize until you get closer to discovery day. And he's like, oh, I don't leave the home ever.
Yeah.
Oh, you're probably not going to be a good franchisee if you don't ever leave home.
It's going to be tough to run this business from a bubble, probably. Yeah, totally. I'm a huge believer in person.
Yeah.
It's just more efficient. You can brainstorm, you can have dynamic discussions and disagreements and go to a whiteboard if you need to even. So I'm looking forward to 5 years down the road, like a more in-person culture, just generally. It's going to take a bit to get back, but.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like what we're doing is, I know you have your office here in New York. What we're doing is my team is all over the country, and we've really built, in my opinion, a strong remote culture. Like where, first of all, if you're running a Fran Dev department, like the frequency of meetings, not long drawn out meetings, but just touching like touching on communication. Like for us, we have a weekly meeting that's short. We have a leadership team meeting. We have a level 10 meeting. We have happy hours where we don't talk about work, virtual, not as fun, but we do that. And then we're getting together. But what we've decided to do is the money we're saving on a big rent expense for that many people, we're putting it toward when we are together. Let's get together. Let's leave the laptops away. Let's brainstorm. Let's whiteboard.
Right.
Let's team build. And then when we get back to the homes, you can just focus on executing and implementing.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like a healthy kind of hybrid model. We're doing the same thing. Some of us are in New York, some of us are not. We do kind of a quarterly offsite where we do bring our laptops and we do some work, but we do a lot of non-work activities. And we also do, some longer term planning, some vision conversations, some whiteboarding. And those are the most fun, right?
Where do you do them?
We've done 3 so far. So we did one in North Carolina. We did one in
North Carolina, like in a resort, a golf course.
We got
hotel.
an Airbnb.
Nice.
So we call it Fran Camp.
I love it.
Yeah. So it was all of us in a big Airbnb, not huge actually, but Airbnb in North Carolina, just hanging out for a week.
How many people are on your team?
We've currently got 7 people, but we are hiring. So if you know any, potential product managers or salespeople, UX designers, I'm not sure if those are in your network at this point, but.
I don't know. We got the podcast, you
That's
never
true.
know who's listening.
Yeah. Hey, hit me up on LinkedIn. But I was, those Titus kids, I thought could make some interesting sales folks, right?
I know. Yeah.
Eager. They're really eager. I think really fun to talk to. So might be reaching out to them as well.
Awesome. Mark Kane, CEO of Franchise Lead. Thanks for joining the show.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Dan.
Awesome time.
Yeah. Super fun.
All right, let's do the wrap up real quick. This goes in the beginning.
Oh, cool.
Okay. Thank you for tuning in to the Franchise Development Playbook. So excited to have our guest today. I want to go a little bit into what we're going to be talking about in today's podcast. If you are in franchise development and you are struggling with keeping your candidates organized, being able to communicate with them effectively with different steps of the buyer journey, or if you are not maybe reporting or tracking your KPIs properly, it could be coming down to not having the right CRM or using your CRM properly. And so today we're going to have a guest that's a very special, friend of mine, Mark Kane, who comes from a business management consulting background, tremendous caliber of experience already behind him. And he takes that and he's applied it to franchising. We get into things like what KPIs to track, what are the most important KPIs to track, how to use AI within your CRM, or to do lead qualifying, lead conversion on the front end. We get into really everything about CRM and franchise development in general. So enjoy the episode. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me, Dan.